I don't think that the ultimate show of love is total obedience, and the self destruction of one's own liberty. And I wouldn't ask that of any of the people that I loved, friends, girlfriends, wife, children. I wouldn't ask them to not do the thing that makes them happy, or to give up control over their own life out of love for me. That's not what I think that love is to consider another person to be an extension of yourself. And that means that I want for them liberty and happiness just like myself. So I think that it would only be a perverse sort of love that would prioritize maintaining this relationship and keeping somebody in a trap close to you over letting them leave if they so chose.
Well, allow me to just because you open that can of worms. Let me defend the because Christianity holds up obedience as the way to freedom, and so your characterization of God's desiring self-sacrifice, even death, total obedience, giving up your plans to live His plan, that kind of thing. You kind of
what was it that Jesus said? If you love your children more than me, then that means you don't really love me. If you love your parents more than me,
exactly. He throws it all down. You have to give absolutely everything. You characterize that as, and this isn't going to come through the audio, but my hands are kind of making a fist, something claustrophobic and just kind of holding something in, caging something in, and that is exactly not what the Christian concept is. The Christian concept is man without access to God is confined like this by himself. And if God is, and kind of this idea of obedience comes from who God is. If God is everything, if God is love, all these things that we want, then the only way to be free, if God is total freedom, the only way to be free is to make a move that looks like total obedience. Make a move that looks like, on the human level, confining yourself. But because of who God is, it is actually the most freeing thing you can do. And then you become love. And this is where this is where the vocabulary, this mystical vocabulary comes in. You become free after having given yourself as a slave, and I think it's interesting to bring up in your concept of liberty and happiness, because I kind of purely my humanitarian impulse still makes my Christian values my Christian values are also informed by my humanitarian impulse. So we have this project of delivering people the most happiness we possibly can.
And liberty too.
Yeah. Your solutions or problems usually you brought up cirrhosis, is it? Psoriasis.
It's a skin condition like dandruff that makes red patchy things on my skin that flip.
Yeah. You also
it's an annoyance.
You also brought up your genes. This kind of what was it called? Kind of dialectic, frustrating dialectic between who I am and who nature has designed me to be. That is really the kind of the stakes that you've put on happiness, I think, are beyond what the average man can attain, and what. Because it's based on avoiding all suffering, and the move that Christianity does is just purely on a humanitarian way, not even admitting that there's a transcendent reality. This is where it gets OP to the masses ish. If you can become okay with suffering, if you can become okay with your psoriasis, if you can become okay with the genes that you've been given, then you have a much greater probability of actually being happy than if you launch this war against anything that threatens to inconvenience you in any way. Because that's just what life is. I mean, you're always going to be inconvenienced. But Christianity has found a way to actually make this happiness a little more plausible in this world.
So the thing here, the reasonable place to go is, if a problem is fixable, then investing time and energy into trying to solve it can yield greater liberty and happiness.
Yeah.
If a problem is not fixable, then investing time and energy into fixing it is not going to yield anything, and it's just going to have this opportunity cost, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if I were to spend all my time thinking about, like, some terrible thing that happened to me in high school, then I wouldn't gain anything from that. It would just, the anger would consume me, and the feelings of loss would consume me. And what would I have to show for it? Nothing. And otherwise happy experiences would be tainted by this anger, or never happen at all. So I don't think that my route towards liberty and happiness is saying, like, you have to fight every fight. Clearly, picking your battles is more efficient and will yield the most liberty and happiness eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a problem that can't be solved, the best thing to do is accept it and move on. But to turn to the psoriasis example, psoriasis is something that does have treatments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you pay attention to it, it can get smaller. It can even, I don't know if it can completely go away, but it can get smaller. So if I were to do, and you attributed this to Christianity, but I think that it's maybe just also very common in Eastern religions, where they're saying like the goal of Buddhism, for example, is complete detachment from the earthly plane, right? It's truly not having preferences about the way that things are on the earthly plane. And if you don't care, then you can't be hurt. So you never suffer, which we're saying, based on my definition of happiness, is true happiness. But I think that's like a route to painlessness, and I don't just want painlessness. I want a rich life. I want my life to be full of emotion. I'll take the bad if the good has to come with the bad.
Yeah.
But I don't like the idea of pure neutrality for every experience. And I don't think that my quest for liberty and happiness means that I've totally lost sight of picking my battles. That's not what I'm trying to suggest. Accept the things that you can't change. Fight to change the things that you think you can change. I may be a little ambitious in what I think is changeable, in that I'm trying to start a movement to change the psyche of the human species and change the priorities of people who have displayed no interest in changing. But nonetheless, that's just a question of ambition.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, your point taken. If, you know, Christianity offers a solution for dealing with suffering, that's all Christianity is for a lot of people. But that suffering does have a solution, or at least maybe has a solution. Either way, it's worth figuring it out, you know, actually trying to resolve it rather than just kind of like finding this escape hatch.
Well, the first thing you should do is understand it, because a lot of problems seem unsolvable, but you don't actually know until you try it once.
Yeah,
you know?
and here's the problem. I presented that view of Christianity just because, I don't know, it's like a working piece. I think it's total bullshit like it, but I agree with you that the effort, it's worth our effort trying to solve these things that cause suffering. Mostly, we've talked about physical things that cause suffering, diseases.
Yeah, but obviously, there are emotional entanglements too that people should work on.
But regardless, it's a good MO to have to like analyze. This creates suffering for humans. Let's eliminate it. This creates suffering for humans. Let's eliminate it.
To try at least once.
Or let's just like what I'm not convinced of is that you can, in even just one human life, like isolate suffering out of a person's question. Has that ever been done? Like, is there ever been a human that can that is not suffered? Because once you get rid of they have to wipe with a stick, and like, oh, now you have like toilet paper, or like I don't know, just like all the little things, and society's gotten better and better. I mean, even you bring up the Eastern religions. It was the Buddha. It was like a really rich prince or whatever, and his family protected
and
him
abandoned
from
his materialistic life in order to live the life of a whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but he started
yes.
in a perfect environment, closed in. There was no suffering, and
a materialistically rich life is what I understand was his origin.
But also, also relationally rich. I mean, he was with his family, and like it was a good life from all standards, seemingly. And yet, something about him was like suffering. You know, I don't know. Yeah, like, can you answer that? Like, why this kind of idea of like, let's get rid of suffering? Is that possible?
Well, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you're asking if we can never reach absolute zero, is it worth trying to reduce suffering at all?
No, that's not my question. Because I think that, all right, so with the absolute zero concept, you're bringing in, like, well, I guess I'd ask you to clarify, like, do you think that we've come much farther than we ever have in reducing suffering? Because we, polio is not a thing, and, like...
I think that just in the realm of disease and violence, and also, like, inequality and the fact that people now get to choose their leaders in the way that they didn't used to before, when it was just warlords and chieftains, and again with monarchies and dictatorships. Has progress been made? Yeah, I think absolutely progress has been made.
But I'm going to get into generally.
But
in terms of human suffering, the whole thing, human suffering in general, has progress been made? Or is there less human suffering today than any other time in history? No, I mean, it's everywhere. And even the people that live great material lives, free of disease, they get, like, they're just, like, their lives are rent by divorce. You know, like, it's like, there's always another thing beyond that's, like...
I've heard it once said that human beings have one scale and they fit their experiences to fit it. They reshape their experiences to fit it.
Yeah.
Like, even if you are this 16-year-old girl who's got everything handed to her, you get your car and your car isn't the color that you want, so you bawl uncontrollably.
Exactly. Yeah.
And obviously that's an example straight out of reality television. I don't know how much it represents true human experience. But yes, if you have all your real needs taken care of, then you'll just end up screaming at your TV when you lose in a video game or something.
Yeah.